Today, we're diving deep into a behavioral pattern that, let's be honest, almost all of us completely misunderstand. We're talking about the psychology of why people go quiet when they're hurt. If you've ever been completely shut out by a partner during an argument, or hey, maybe you're the one who just literally loses your voice when you feel emotional pain, you know exactly how frustrating this dynamic can be. In this explainer, we're going to look at the real psychology behind this reaction, and we're going to validate the immense pain on both sides of that silence.
All right, to start things off, we've got to bust a massive myth right out of the gate. When someone is hurting, they don't always cry or scream or argue. Sometimes they just give you those two terribly familiar words, "I'm fine." But as you can probably guess, "I'm fine" is rarely the truth. We usually jump to label this as avoidance or the silent treatment or maybe even cowardice. But in reality, it is an instinctive, desperate plea for space from someone who's currently experiencing an overwhelming internal storm.
Picture this, because it brilliantly illustrates the core conflict. Look at the comparison here. What you see on the outside is a calm, cold, totally still lake. It honestly looks like they don't care at all. But what is actually happening right beneath that surface is a chaotic internal tempest. There are just too many thoughts and feelings clashing at the exact same time. So you see, the silence isn't empty, not at all. It's absolutely packed with an intensity that their brains simply cannot process out loud.
Section 1. The biology of freezing, not a rational choice. Okay, to truly understand what's going on, we have to look at the hard science for a second. The absolute most important thing you can realize today is that speaking up or staying silent during heated conflict isn't actually a rational choice. It's biological. Dr. Stephen Porges' famous polyvagal theory shows how our autonomic nervous system responds to emotional threats totally independently of our willpower. It escalates in 3 levels. Step 1 is social engagement. That's when we're calm and can just use our words to say, hey, that hurt me. If stress rises, we hit step 2, fight or flight, where we might argue or just storm out of the room. But when the pain becomes completely overwhelming and the nervous system decides fighting or fleeing just isn't going to work, we hit step 3, dorsal vagal shutdown.
Let's look closely at the definition of this step 3 free state. Imagine an electronic device that is suddenly receiving way too much current. To prevent the entire system from completely burning out and being destroyed, a safety mechanism kicks in and automatically short-circuits the device, right? The physiological switch just flips off. That sudden, icy silence you witness in your partner, that is the exact moment their biological switch flips. And surprisingly, in this state, their heart rate actually drops to preserve core survival energy.
And here is the physical proof of that shutdown. During this state, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logic and language, temporarily, physically disconnects from the amygdala, your emotional center. So even if there are literally thousands of thoughts screaming inside their head, language is biologically locked. It is physically impossible for them to find their voice, to turn those racing thoughts into coherent words. Crazy, right?
Moving to Section 2, the quiet fortress, origins of silence.
So, where does this intense biological reaction actually come from? The nervous system doesn't just learn to freeze and shut down overnight. It usually stems from one of the 3 origins you see here. First, childhood wounds. If crying was punished or ignored when they were young, their brain learned a really harsh equation: vulnerability equals danger. Second, toxic relationships in adulthood. If a past partner constantly gaslit them or weaponized their words, they learn the hard way that speaking only makes things worse. And third, simple brain wiring. Some people are just naturally internal processors. In a loud conflict, their brain is like an old computer with like 100 tabs open. They desperately need a loading screen to organize the chaos before they can even speak. So in all 3 cases, silence is a vital shield, not some kind of personality flaw.
Section 3. Hidden truths beneath the surface. Now that we know why this fortress gets built, let's peel back the layers and look at the psychological truths actively unfolding beneath that seemingly still water during a fight. Truth number 1 is that their silence is incredibly busy. Let's talk about the default mode network, or DMN. During a conflict, this system completely overactivates. So they aren't turning off or just ignoring you. Their mind is working at a terrifying intensity. They're trapped in this chaotic analysis maze, asking themselves stuff like, was it my fault? What do they mean? If I speak right now, is it going to make it worse? They're dissecting every tiny detail on a loop. Even though they look totally frozen, this analysis maze is burning a massive amount of cognitive energy.
Which brings us to truth number 2, and it involves Dr. Dan Siegel's concept of the window of tolerance.
Basically, this is the psychological space where we can actually function and communicate normally. When an argument deeply hurts someone, they are violently pushed completely outside this window. They get thrown into a state of pure emotional overload, and they can feel the surge of incredibly harsh, dark emotional energy rising up inside them.
And this brilliant concept illustrates exactly why they stay quiet when pushed outside that window. If you are the partner on the receiving end of this, please listen closely. The silence you are interpreting as a direct rejection is actually them desperately holding a storm inside. They know that if they speak in that overloaded state, what comes out won't be honest communication. It will literally be verbal bullets. They use silence as a shield to make sure they don't leave permanent emotional scars on you. Ultimately, they're doing it to protect the relationship.
But of course, as the partner, we don't always see the shield, do we? We just see a brick wall. Which leads to this classic, deeply frustrating psychological chase. You end up following them from room to room, totally exasperated, asking, "Why aren't you saying anything? How long are you going to stay silent?" But remember the biology we just went over. Pushing a completely shut down person to speak right in that moment is quite literally like asking someone with a broken leg to stand up and run a marathon. It's just not going to happen.
And look at the tragic irony of this dynamic. The demand feels like asking a drowning person to sing. And the result? Demanding connection when they are biologically overloaded only confirms their deepest, oldest fears that they aren't safe. It forces their nervous system to retreat even further into its defensive shell. Sure, you might eventually force them to say something, but it will just be empty words they're using to escape the pressure.
Section 4. Presence without demands. Building a bridge.
So how do we actually fix this? How do we build an empathy bridge and reach a closed-off heart without breaking its fragile hinges? Well, if your partner shuts down, here is your exact script. Seriously, memorize this. Say, "I can see you're overwhelmed, and I respect that. I'll be in the living room. I'm here to listen without judgment." Listen, stepping back is not abandonment. It is the absolute key to diffusing their freeze response. When the demand to speak vanishes, their guard naturally lowers. They start to feel safe, and physically, the blood flow actually naturally returns to the language centers of their brain.
Section 5. Building safe exits. Defrosting emotions. Now let's flip the script for a second. If you are the person who goes quiet, you have work to do too. You have to take control of your defense system so your protective shield doesn't accidentally turn into a permanent, isolating wall. Here is your safe exit script. The second you feel that shutdown happening, give this small signal. "My mind feels stuck. I need about 30 minutes alone to calm down, but I promise I'll come back." This simple little sentence is a powerful bridge. It gives you the necessary time to defrost your emotions while offering your partner the absolutely crucial reassurance that you aren't just abandoning them.
And I really want to reassure anyone watching who relates to being a quiet processor, your pace is not a flaw. Actually, scratch that. It's not just not a flaw. It is a profound emotional integrity. In a world where people are constantly reacting with impulsive, empty, or hurtful words, quiet people do the exact opposite. When they finally do speak, their conclusions have been carefully refined through hundreds of filters of honesty and compassion. Which leaves us with this final thought to wrap up our explainer today. For those of us loving a quiet processor, it really comes down to a choice. Are you going to continue to view their quietness as a calculated weapon of rejection? Or will you step back and embrace it as an invitation to a deeper understanding? Because silence isn't empty, not at all. It's proof of a deep soul weathering an incredible storm beneath the surface, just waiting for someone safe enough to sit with them in the quiet. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I truly hope this helps you build stronger, more empathetic bridges.